Hi everybody. In this particular assignment, we're creating some color schemes using the last color harmonies that we're going to be studying. This is sort of the end of the kind of the classic color harmonies, which are triad and tetrad. And there's a few more harmonies you might sort of see out there in the world. Somebody might refer to them, but the ones that we have covered, the monochrome, analogous, split comp, and now triad and tetrad are really, I think, the sort of the main ones that you will find in general that you'll work with. Um, and the other thing that we're working with in this assignment was just starting to connect color with the kind of the things that we associate with color. If you think of red, what is the symbolism of red, or the psychological or physical effects of color? If you paint a room bright red, what does that sort of do to your, to the room, to your feeling, your mood? If you use the color red in a design, what are you saying? That's all of those things that we relate to color. And so that's one of the things we're really, I think, adding this week, is that idea of like looking at color from the point of view is, what is it saying? Like, what's a calm color? What is a color that's really revved up and energetic? What's a color that's more kind of relates to, earthiness? And in general, because we're looking at a number of different colors here, you can say that they all work together. But one of the things that you're trying to do is sort of take one hue, like the assignment talks about, and use that as the basis of your design. So if you're working with a triad and you want to work with a cool, kind of quiet, sort of, tranquil type of color scheme, then you might pick a cool color and then build, your scheme around that. Add the other colors that might support that feeling, if that makes sense. I would say that when you get to triad and tetrad, because you're working with so many more hues, that you tend to have a more sort of layered type of meaning. If you just work with the monochrome of blue, like one single hue, it's much easier to kind of convey that sense with just one hue. You know what I mean? Whereas the more you add, the more you have to sort of be mindful of, oh, I've got to sort of balance it more towards, um, uh, you know, cool colors, more kind of quiet, quiet down the other colors in some way, because you're working with so many different ones. I don't know if that's made sense. Hopefully I can articulate it a little bit more as we go through. One thing before we get started, I wanted to mention, there is this website by Adobe called color.adobe.com. It used to be called Cooler, but they changed the name to this one, coloradobe.com. And if you just Google for it, you'll find this page. And it's a really interesting page because it allows you to kind of explore color harmonies a little bit more. If you, let's see here, go here, then you'll see that it doesn't actually have all of our harmonies in here, but it can help you generate harmonies, kind of visualize them. And you can also then save whatever harmony you've created and bring it into, your Adobe program, whether it's Illustrator or Software or Photoshop or whatever. So you can kind of build color harmonies here. The other thing that I like really a lot here is that you can actually create a harmony from an image. Like, let's see, what kind of, oh, got so many pictures here that are old that I don't know what they are. Oh, here's my cat. So what you can do here is actually bring in a picture, a photograph. You look at the bottom, you can see, let me see if I can get this up a little bit more. There we go. It actually will generate, it'll pick colors from the photograph, which is so cool. And then you can kind of go through a menu here, and you can, let's try dark colors. So it'll kind of pick some of the darker colors, and you can see what it actually has is some pins that are placed on the photograph. So you can actually move the pins around if you like. You see that? So I'm kind of, maybe if I want to add some more of these oranges, so it's actually sampling from the photograph. So if you get a lot of times we see photographs, like whether it's just a photograph you find on Pinterest, or maybe it's like you know, a graphic design image that you find, or an artwork like a painting or something that inspires you. You really love the colors. Well, what you can do is you can bring it in here and sample them, and then you can actually save it. You need to be signed in to save it. I'm not right now, but if you were, you could click this save button and it'll help download a file onto your computer, which is like a color file that you can then import into your Photoshop or your Illustrator or whatever, and it'll have a little palette in there that you can use in your design. So it's super cool. I think that there's some of these tools that may be integrated in Illustrator, but I don't know if the photo sampling one is there. So it's good. It's just, I really like it. I find it a very handy tool. Okay, let's get started. Let's see. Cakes and fruit salad. That's, you know, great inspiration. I think that there's a lot in those, you know, that as a starting point. And yeah, you know, both of these, so you've got love and hunger. So I would say with love, this definitely to me conveys that there's kind of this sweet quality, which I think relates to your kind of cake idea, which I think is really great. And then for this one, hunger, you know, I think if you emphasize the reds a little bit more, maybe the reds, purples, I don't know, maybe make it a little more intense, I think you could get hunger, you know. But the other thing too is, you know, if you want to call it like, you know, like a fruit cake, um, you could even call it fruitcake, you know, if that's what it was. Like you could name it that. I think that would be fine. Because I think that, you know, that I think that's slightly different than hunger. And now I'm glad you described what your inspiration, you know, was, because that now makes a lot of sense. So I might just change that a little bit. But um, otherwise, I think I like your mixture of kind of lights and darks, you know, desaturated, a little more saturated colors. That's often the way to kind of make a nice harmony, is to really play with the values and saturations. I might change this just a little bit more. These two are maybe almost the same, so you maybe make this a little lighter. You know, it's nice to have it's nice to have your colors just maybe slightly different. Like I might make this just a wee bit different. But otherwise, I think yeah, it looks maybe these two just a wee bit different. You could, you know, even if there could be the same value, but maybe desaturated a little bit more. Again, you just want to have like a variety of different colors in your palette to choose from. But yeah, I think this is going in a good direction. Okay, Kristen. Yeah, so this definitely I feel is like quiet. I like the emphasis on the darker and the blues mainly. Not just darker, but in general. And also the greens will give you a lot of coolness as well. You know, and then when you create the design, you can really think about the colors that are promoting that sense of quiet and how they will be like the, you know, the dominant colors, like, you know, maybe the largest area of the design, and then you can sort of insert just little bits of this red, this reddy orange, you know, like little pops of color within the larger kind of cooler, quieter colors. So that'll be good. For aggravated, yeah, I like this emphasis on the red. I definitely think that that is going to give you that sort of aggravation. Yellow as well can be an aggravated color, so you might want to pop in like a kind of like a maybe a bit of a brighter yellow in there. That could add that kind of sense of, you know, aggravation. You know, when we think of aggravated colors too, we often think of like kind of like, you know, intense, like saturated colors. So I think that, for example, these two give you that sense of aggravation, you know, that kind of vibrating quality that those saturated colors have. So I think that would be the only thing I might even suggest in here, is maybe just like create a little bit of intensity with that yellow in there as well. Okay, nice job. Okay, Robert, yes. I like a little bit of tequila every once in a while. There's a little Mexican place near me, and there's something about, you know, tequila, I have to say, that is a little creative um, in terms of liquors. Not that I'm suggesting people should go out and, you know, start drinking to get more creative, but it is interesting that it does seem to have that quality. Okay, let's start with your happy. Uh, let's see here. Yeah, there's your square. Yeah, and I think that when I think of happy too, I think of kind of a lightness, a light quality. And I do think that having these lighter, paler colors, they tend to be that they have that visual sort of sense of being lighter. I think that could be really good in a happy design. You know what I mean? Especially if you use a lot of that kind of paler, lighter color in your design. And for gloomy, yes, I think purple is a really nice kind of dominant, it could be a good dominant color in here. And I actually agree, I agree with the people commenting that maybe go a little gloomier with those purples. Like kind of think of purpley, sort of foggy, kind of, um, when we think of gloominess, we sort of think of sort of like environments that are a little darker and, in darker spaces, like when we don't have a lot of light, it's really interesting because color desaturates naturally. Like if you're, in a dark environment, really notice that even if something that's brightly colored will appear kind of drained of color. So that can be a really nice way to start, creating that gloominess is by desaturating things. I could see you doing that actually with some of this other colors too. Is like kind of draining the color a little bit, and then you'll notice it'll get maybe a little bit darker and sort of drained or desaturated. So you'd go towards the tones a little bit more, maybe darker tones. Okay, yeah, that's what I would suggest for for the triad. Thanks for including that GIF. It's so fun. Wow, it's really amazing what you created with that environment. Yeah, and I definitely can see how, working with these color harmonies would really help in that part of your process, working with the color. Okay, yeah, fall leaves, summer fun. I think these both work really well, to convey that. I like the idea of the kind of the fall rich colors right in here. That'll definitely create that kind of fall experience. And then summer, it's interesting how, you've worked seasonally, and when we think of summer, we sort of do tend to think of more sort of saturated, brighter kind of colors, before things start kind of, turning color in the fall. So, um, yeah, good job. I don't see any changes you need to make here. I love your idea here of ground life and sea life. That's really interesting. I would have never thought of that. Just like the idea of, working with ground colors like the earth, like being on terrain, and then being in the, in the sea or the ocean. It's really great thinking. Yeah, so I would say in your color harmonies, you just want to make sure that you stick with your harmony here. So greens, that's great. All of your greens in here. Orange, I imagine this is probably part of your oranges right in here, and then purple would be your next color. So you'd want to just make sure to take out, it looks to me, I would double check all of these, but these three here, the blue and the yellow, And then what I would also think about too is maybe this white should be a pale version of one of these colors. So really pale orange or pale green or pale purple, um, so that you'd have that available. Okay, that's the main thing here is I would just reduce those colors a little bit. For sea life, let's see here, you've got, um, it looks to me, let's actually open this in Photoshop. So this is your kind of your magenta-y color right here. Let's go into the color picker. And it looks like all these three here are part of that. They're, I think, mostly on track. You might want to just double check. So this is so I like to use this little hue box in here. And this is what that magenta is colored at, is 330. And so you would just, so there it is, 330. Here we're switching a little. Can you see we're now at 314? And there we are at 330. So this one you'd want to change, to make sure you're at um, 330. And then you can see here, you can go anywhere within here, within that color picker, and the hue stays the same, and the only thing that changes is the value in saturation. So that's a good way to kind of stay on track with that. So let's see. So you also have blue here, and to me looks good. That looks really good. So that's all right on track. And then you've got yellow and green, yellow and green. So it looks like you've added a little orange in here, maybe by accident, so you would want to take that out. And this color in here is also something you'd want to take out and replace with those hues. Okay, so that's the main thing here. I love the idea of, so with sea life, if you want to focus on something like the color of the water, the blues and greens, that would be, think about that as, and then use these other ones as your accent color. That could be really nice. Anyhow, I would just work on that a little bit more. And with your really dark color here, again, as I mentioned before, a watch going right into that corner, like pull it up a little bit so you get a dark color that just has a hint of your hue, whichever one. Let's make it 330 just for the sake of it being one of your hues that I can remember. So can you see how now we've got a really dark color? You could even go maybe a wee bit darker, but you can see that you're kind of keeping a little bit of that hue without going solid black. So that's what you always want to be doing with the whites, the grays, and your blacks, is to just bring it into being the tints, tones, and shades of your hue. Okay, Brienne. Again, like I mentioned earlier, feel free, you could call this Serene Fields of Lavender if you want. You don't just need to keep it one word. I think the assignment says one word, but I'm okay if you want to make it more descriptive with the thought in your, in your mind, like your Fields of Lavender or your, I think you said Garden in Spring, just like a lively garden in spring. I don't know. I like words, so okay, so I love the idea of using a lot of lavender. I think this looks really nice. I might just play with this one here. Let's see if I've got this in Photoshop already. Hold on a second here. I was going to suggest maybe making a few of these a little bit different, but I actually think they're different enough. They're definitely much different in terms of saturation, so I think they look good. I love the idea of having a paler one and a darker one. And then here, yep, this looks really good too. You've got a nice series of colors and chosen from your tetrad. And yeah, again, I love the kind of the paler versus the darker, richer colors in here. Very nice. Hi, Delta. Okay, so for quiet. Yeah, it's really interesting. I do think this is a very quiet palette, and I think it's because you're kind of working with sort of a mid-range value, like not really big contrast. When we have more contrast, lights and darks, it gets more dramatic. So this is a great approach. But what I would say here is when you choose the triad, so triad means three, and you're thinking three equally distant colors. So your color would actually be blue here. That would be your third color rather than green. But if you just substitute the greens with the blue, and kind of keep your approach and sort of, not too large of a range in contrast, you'll still keep that nice quiet quality that you have going on. So what's interesting too, I just want to point out as a general comment, colors themselves, like a color like the cool colors, blue, purple, and green, tend to be quiet, and especially, blue and purple, they tend to be kind of quiet and introverted and tranquil. But you can also take warmer colors and kind of, just by making them sort of softer and desaturated, and then in general your entire palette, if you make everything sort of the same value range and saturation somewhat, or mostly value range, you can kind of keep it quiet too. So it's not just the cooler colors, though that is really, those are the classically cool colors and, tranquil colors. Let's see, for this one right here, you're almost there. You want to just add a fourth color here, which would be here. So you want to draw a rectangle or a square in your wheel, and you're on a rectangle, so this is the purple here. So you'd want to add purple to your scheme. So unlike this one, Quiet, which I think is working really well, I'm not sure if I'm quite getting a fresh quality to your design. It feels a little maybe heavy, and when I think of fresh, I think of lighter colors. So in a way, I tend to think of these colors not just as being quiet, but also a little fresher, because they're a little lighter, a little kind of, they have that sort of fresh quality to them. So I might kind of go with maybe lighter colors, maybe here, if you want to go with fresh. Think of fresh flowers, fresh fruit or produce. Think of all those types of colors that oftentimes we associate with that sense of freshness. Fresh water. Trying to think of other things. Maybe other folks will have ideas of what, when they think of fresh, what they think of as being fresh. Um, okay. Okay, Ethan, sunny, that's a good one. Yes, sunny. What do we think of when the sun's out? And then you've got blue, red, and yellow. Yeah, that all looks really good. So what I would just say here in yours is just to maybe make your colors a little bit different, a little bit more different. You know, each one of these should be a little more, just a little more unique. Play with them lighter or darker, um, and saturated versus desaturated. Just experiment a little bit more with the range. And I would say, with the same thing with this one here. Yeah, you've got this all dialed in now. I love the idea of health. That's a great one. What does health mean? I kind of think health actually could relate to these colors here, which when we think of health or good health, we sort of think of vibrancy. So I think color definitely could convey that sense of, energy and life and vitality through the saturation levels. I would just say the same thing. Try to make them a little bit more different. Like these look a little bit similar. Make each of these four unique, in some way as a swatch, because then when you go to the next assignment, you will have a variety of different colors. In general, I would say, like having light to dark, desaturated to a little bit more saturated, having that kind of combination is a good thing to have. I do think working with color is very therapeutic. I find it the same way, especially when, you can get in the flow of working with color and just have fun trying out, colors and playing with them. So yeah, let's see, imperturbable. That's a really interesting word. You don't hear it being used very often, but it is also sort of like implacable, or where you are serene and you can't be moved. Um, yeah, I can see that in yours. There's a softness to the color range. I can especially see maybe if you focus a little bit on some of the cooler colors in your design and use some of these kind of more vibrant ones as your accents, to kind of keep it real stable. But I like these color choices. You've got magenta, yellow, and blue. Yeah, that looks good. And for majestic, oh, that's a nice one too. What do we think of what creates majesty? And I like the kind of the nice sort of jewel tones in here, right in here. These are really nice. I do think of them as being majestic. Especially the purple. They have that kind of royal kind of quality to it. And let's see, you have, okay, yeah, you're working with a square here. Um, Yeah, I think these look really good. The only thing I would change here is this color right here is a little bit dark. Like I like this is a great dark color because I can tell where it came from, right, in your hues. So it came from here. So it's like a really dark version of your teal color here. So I would do the same thing with this one right here, is just bring it up a little bit, add a little more of that underlying hue to it, either one of these, so that it doesn't seem so solid black. Exactly, I think identified what I was trying to say in my introduction, which is that it does get more complicated when you're trying to bring in a full color scheme. Um, oh, interesting. You based your color schemes off movies. That's a great idea. And that is exactly how, um, you know, movies, whether it's animation or a good movie in that's in real life, you could say, somebody who's designing the sets and the photography, they'll really think about the color and how the color mood um, is really going to convey what's happening in the storyline, you know. Um, so let's see. So yeah, I think you did a nice job here with Triad. That definitely to me conveys the feeling of excited, kind of like little bits of intensity with the colors, but also kind of like a sense of lightness and darkness, which creates that sense of you know, contrast, which I think is exciting. Like when you think of somebody who is excitable, there's a lot of like up and down and energy. And I like this yellow here too, which is like a really pale version of it. And then this one, fear too. This is a good one too, which is that, fear is I think of when you're in fear, you're constricted, and there's a kind of, to me, a heavy sort of tense quality to a sense of fear, like kind of closing in. you know? So I think the darker colors work really well with that. And the only thing I would say with this one again is just maybe make sure that you're not going too solid black with some of these, like try to, you know, move them into a little bit more of the underlying hue, if that makes sense. Um, Bring that up just a wee bit in the color picker. Okay, but yeah, nice job and interesting um, interpretations of these particular states, emotional states.